Hey geographers, it's Coach Fishbein here with your Unit 3 review for AP Human Geography. I got my shirt in a different language on, representing my favorite baseball team, and we're going to go over everything you need to know about AP Human Geography Unit 3. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, so we're going to start off with this definition, because in this unit we are talking about culture and everything related to culture and cultural geography. And in order for us to do that, we need to know what culture is. And according to experts, culture refers to the beliefs, values, practices, behaviors, and technologies shared by a society and passed down from generation to generation. Now, that probably doesn't sound that useful to you, right? It's really hard for us to define culture, to explain what culture is, but we all kind of know what it is. And namely, we have two different types of culture, and the one that's most obvious is material culture. And those are the things we can feel, we can see, we can taste them sometimes. And I have some examples here for you of material culture that we see where I'm from in San Diego. All right, carne asada fries is a staple of San Diego Mexican American cuisine. In fact, I'm going to get some of that here pretty soon. Hooded sweatshirts, flip flops, the music we listen to. One of my favorite bands, Blink-182. All of those are examples of material culture. All right. And it's a lot different from non-material culture, which is a little bit tougher to see, but we still experience it. And those are the values we have or the beliefs we have. Things like relaxing by the beach or being adventurous and wanting to spend time in the outdoors. Those are all values that are kind of unique to San Diego culture. Okay. Now let's get into some cultural traits. And cultural traits could be anything. It could be architecture, it could be food, it could be land use, the clothes you wear, the television you watch, the music you listen to. These are just a few examples of cultural traits that are kind of obvious and ones that you can see in my community of San Diego, whether it's those college campuses that you see down there on the lower left, the Mexican food that you see in the center, or even the way we use our land, whether we have skate parks in different parts of San Diego, or monuments to surfing like we have in Imperial Beach. All right. Now, all of these cultural traits manifest themselves in two different kinds of cultures that human geographers are concerned about. And the one that's probably most familiar to you is pop culture, right? You probably recognize nearly all of these brands and logos that you see here on the screen because they're everywhere. They're very prevalent. They're a part of pop culture. Lots of people in the United States and around the world today enjoy eating McDonald's. They enjoy watching Netflix. They enjoy drinking Coca-Cola. They enjoy watching Star Wars or wearing Nike. These are the brands, the technologies, the shows, the types of music, the sports that are very common, very popular, and very prevalent throughout our society. And this is a lot different from traditional culture. Traditional culture or local culture, or sometimes it's even called folk culture, they all relate back to specific places, and they're kind of slowly dying out as a result of the prevalence of pop culture. Okay. Now, how do people understand different cultures? There's basically two schools of thought here, one that we call ethnocentrism and the other that we call cultural relativism. And you see on this screen, I have an image from, in my opinion, a pretty good Disney movie, one that you're probably familiar with, in Aladdin. All right. Now, unfortunately, from our 21st century perspective, Aladdin has a very ethnocentric view of the world. And even in this image, you can kind of see it where all of the bad guys in this image have a beard, right? And you'll probably remember from the movie that two of the only characters who have American accents are the good guys in Aladdin and Jasmine, right? Everybody else either has a Middle Eastern accent or a British accent. And what the filmmakers did, and remember, this was a movie that was made in the 90s, so this type of idea wasn't as influential back then. But what the filmmakers ended up doing is they projected American culture onto this Middle East setting, and they gave the heroes very prototypical American traits, like an American accent, like a clean shaven face. Even Aladdin has lighter skin than the bad guy, like Jafar. So all of those are examples of ethnocentrism, and Aladdin gets a lot of criticism from our 21st century perspective because of that. All right. A better way of interacting with different cultures is to understand them from where they're coming from. And we call that school of thought cultural relativism. All right, let's move on to cultural landscapes. So if you look outside, if you were to go outside your house or to go walk down the street, everywhere around you, you can see the built environment or the cultural landscape. All right, this is different from a physical or a natural landscape, which is going to be, the surface of the earth that has been relatively untouched by humans. So if you're looking at a mountain or a lake or a river, that's the physical landscape or the natural landscape, and that's a little bit different than the cultural landscape. The cultural landscape is the built environment. It's what the humans have done to the surface of the earth. And what we did in my class is we had some practice reading cultural landscapes. And what you see in the image here is a picture of Balboa Park in downtown San Diego. And there's a lot of things you can pick out of this image that tell us about the society of San Diego, what San Diegans have felt to be important over time, whether it's the traditional Spanish architecture of the California Tower back here in the distance, or also here in this museum, you see the traditional Spanish plaza right there as well. There's a lot of Spanish influence in a place like Balboa Park, and San Diegans throughout history have felt that that's pretty important for us to preserve. All right. Another key aspect of the cultural landscape is this idea called sequent occupants. Sequent occupants is essentially what humans have done to the landscape through time, and as different cultures have kind of cycled through the landscape. So you see like this historical photo right here of the Western Metal Supply Company building. All right. If you're a fan of the Padres like I am, then this building probably seems a little bit familiar to you because it's not used as a factory anymore, as a warehouse anymore, but now it's the left field foul pole at Petco Park. So different cultures and different societies have used this building in different ways, whether it was previously as a warehouse or now as a pretty cool feature in a baseball field. All right. Another key aspect of cultural landscapes are called ethnic neighborhoods. All right. And we have a lot of them in my hometown of San Diego, whether it's Little Saigon in the City Heights neighborhood, Little Italy, Barrio Logan, and Chicano Park down here, or the Convoy neighborhood in the northern part of San Diego. All of those ethnic neighborhoods celebrate different types of cuisines, different traditions from various places around the world. And they give San Diego a bit of a unique character and also like a unique neighborhood and a unique destination for us locals to go to. All right, let's get into patterns, cultural patterns, and how these cultural patterns create places. My class will probably remember that we took the New York Times dialect quiz, and I actually took the quiz again in the lead up to this video, and I got this map. And you'll see that California is the darkest red over here, meaning that the dialect that I came up with on the quiz was most shared in this area of the United States. It's a lot different than the Deep South, right? In the Deep South, they speak a very different type of English than I do. So you'll see that this region of the country is a deeper shade of blue, okay? But dialects play a large role in creating place. All right. Another key aspect is religion or majority religion. And this map is unique because it shows us the largest religion within a certain area. Okay. Whether it's Catholics are all in the purple areas or Latter-day Saints in this area and primarily Utah and the surrounding states. Lutherans up in the northern part of North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, into Wisconsin a little bit, or Southern Baptists throughout much of the southern United States, all the way as far west as Texas and as far northeast as into Virginia and North Carolina. All right, let's talk about centripetal forces. So centripetal forces are these forces that are going to connect people or have people feel a stronger attachment to the place in which they live. All right. Historically, language and religion have played a very large role in that. And you see that because in Latin America, Christianity acts as a centripetal force, despite the fact that Christianity started, in an entirely different continent a long time ago before the Europeans ever came to the Western Hemisphere. So you see that either in Mexico City at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, or in Rio de Janeiro, where Christ the Redeemer sits atop this mountain overlooking the city. But it's not always language and religion that is going to play a centripetal force. Even sports can play a role in that. So you see here, the United States women's soccer team. This is right after they won the Women's World Cup in 2019. And I went to Petco Park to go watch that match with my son and with my wife, and everybody was going crazy cheering for the United States. And you felt this palpable American pride in that moment. And it really served to bring people together, to rally together around, just something as kind of inconsequential as a winning soccer team. All right. Centrifugal forces, on the other hand, are forces that create divisions amongst people. And there's lots of different causes of centrifugal forces, whether it's poverty, ethnic issues, or violence, like you see here in this image of Nagorno-Karabakh in the Central Asian region. Those are going to be forces that create divisions between people and make it so that people don't see quite eye to eye. And this could have a lot of different effects, whether it's independence movements or social isolation, or other effects that we'll get into in the next video on Unit 4. All right, let's talk about diffusion for a little bit. When we're talking about diffusion, we got to talk about hearths. Hearths are where things came from. So think about like a fireplace. The fireplace begins in the hearth, right? That's where the fire starts. And then that idea diffuses out to other places, all right? One example I like to use is the Caesar salad, a staple of some of my very favorite Italian restaurants. And you would think that it had its hearth probably in Italy, right? Well, in reality, the Caesar salad was started at the Hotel Caesar in Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. All right, a little surprising probably for some of you, but the hearth of the Caesar salad was actually not too far south from here, just about 15 miles from where I am right now, just south of the border in Tijuana. Okay, yeah, Caesar salads are Mexican food. So types of diffusion, we have two main types. We have relocation diffusion and expansion diffusion. And we'll talk about relocation diffusion in a second. But it's important for you to know that then there's three different subtypes of expansion diffusion as well, called contagious diffusion, hierarchical diffusion, and stimulus diffusion. And we'll talk about each of those in just a moment. All right, but first let's do relocation diffusion. This should be the easiest type of diffusion for you to kind of visualize in your mind, because this is when either someone or something is moving from one place to another. All right. So let's think about that Caesar salad again, right? That idea of the Caesar salad probably initially diffused pretty rapidly throughout Tijuana, and I'm assuming San Diego as well, through relocation diffusion. All right. Whether somebody just heard about this awesome salad and they wanted to take that to another part of Tijuana, or they wanted to take it home, or they told somebody in San Diego about it, that idea of the Caesar salad just essentially got up and moved from one place to another. Okay. Another type of relocation diffusion that we see all the time here in the United States are people moving here to the United States and becoming American citizens. All right. You see here an image of a lot of new Americans, right? Americans who are taking the pledge of citizenship to be a member of this country. And they all relocated, right? They relocated from wherever their home country was. And now they are becoming an American here in the United States. All right. Next, let's talk about contagious diffusion. So contagious diffusion diffuses from person to person, right? It spreads regardless of power. It spreads regardless of class. It spreads regardless of race or ethnicity. It just goes everywhere, right? And the best example I could give you is the thing that's on everybody's mind right now is the coronavirus, right? The coronavirus doesn't care whether you're rich or poor, whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white, whether you like the Yankees or the Red Sox. Coronavirus spreads in a contagious fashion to everybody. All right. Hierarchical diffusion is another example. And this idea spreads in like a top-down approach. Okay. So essentially, somebody who is more influential or more powerful might have this idea, or they might come across this idea, and they're going to use their influence to spread it to people who are relatively less powerful or influential, right? A great example of this is fashion, right? Somebody famous wears something either in a fashion show or maybe even like in a TikTok or an Instagram story, and then that idea catches on, and then it diffuses downwards to people of relatively less influence, people of relatively less power, all right? Next, we got stimulus diffusion. And in stimulus diffusion, the thing that's diffusing is changing a little bit, right? So you see like this blue circle, it's diffusing off onto the rightward part, half of the screen, but it's not staying just completely blue. It goes from blue to blue and white, and then even to blue, white, and red. And that is because it is changing. Something about the stimulus is changing. A good example of that is the Maharaja Mac, which is a sandwich they eat at McDonald's in India. All right. If you know anything about Hinduism, you will know that they don't eat cows as a part of that religion. And it's pretty tough to eat a Big Mac if you're not going to eat cows. So they have created their own type of Indian inspired cuisine that they have at McDonald's. It's not the McDonald's that we're used to here in the United States, but it's still McDonald's nonetheless. All right. Let's get into some language ideas now and how languages diffuse. All right. What you got to know to begin with is that languages come from language families. And I really love this image from The Guardian of the Indo-European and Uralic language families. All right. So Indo-European was like the original incarnation of all of these different languages. Okay. And then that language, as it diffused throughout time and space, change a little bit by bit, into different language branches, into different language groups. And then you see the languages themselves, which would be the leaves of the tree here in this image. All right. And then we know that there's different types of English, right? I've already talked about how in the South, they speak a different dialect of English from what I speak here in California. So imagine all these different leaves. They probably look a little bit different. They're probably a different shape, a different size. All of those would be different language or different dialects in this example. Okay. Now, as a result of language diffusion, we get toponyms or place names. Here in California, as we mentioned before, there's a heavy Spanish and Mexican influence in this neighborhood. And we see that with our place names. Here in the San Diego region, where lots of our places, lots of our cities in this example, use the Spanish language, whether it's Escondido, La Mesa, Chula Vista, El Cajon. Those are all in Spanish, and we pronounce them a little differently when we're saying them in English, right? Like Escondido, El Cajon, Chula Vista. But we're using the Spanish language to convey those place names, and that is because of language diffusion. All right, next we got religious diffusion. Okay. Skipped one. So let's go here. Universalizing religions first. Okay. Universalizing religions. The way that I think about this is that if you are a member of a universalizing religion, you would be perfectly okay if you made everyone in the universe a member of your religion. You feel like that is the one true religion. You feel like this faith has something to offer to anybody. And you might even go out and try to convert other people to your faith, right? Those are called universalizing religions. And there's four main examples that we would like you to know, whether that's Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Sikhism. Okay. And in fact, you can see evidence of all four of these universalizing religions in the landscape here in San Diego, whether it's Mount Soledad in La Jolla, or this Islamic Community Center, not too far away from La Jolla, or these Buddhist temples, or these Sikh, I can't pronounce the word, but it's Gurudwar, something like that. Sorry if I probably mispronounced that. I apologize, but I'm trying. But these are different places of worship for these different universalizing religions. And San Diego is a big enough city that we have an adherence of all four of those religions here in this community. And we can see examples of those religions across the landscape. All right. Now, different from universalizing religions are ethnic religions. Whereas universalizing religions are going to spread through not only relocation diffusion, but expansion diffusion as well. Ethnic religions typically only diffuse through relocation diffusion, because ethnic religions usually don't go out and try to convert other people to their religion. Okay. And the two main examples we have of that are Judaism and Hinduism. And these two places are also in San Diego, but they're on the inside. So you can't wouldn't really count the inside as part of the cultural landscape. But it is another example how Judaism and Hinduism have communities here in San Diego as well. All right, so let's talk about what has caused diffusion throughout history. And one of the big causers of diffusion has been imperialism. All right, this map shows us the extent of the British Empire. We see that word in a way in the word imperialism. We see empire in there, and imperialism is just a way a country is going to expand their reach beyond their borders. Okay, so just from being a member of the world for however long you've been alive, that English is spoken in a lot of different places, not just in England, right? It is spoken here in the United States, in Canada, in many parts of South Asia, in Africa, and in Australia. And that goes back to the extent of the British Empire. So imperialism has been a big causer of diffusion throughout history. But there's been other causes as well, whether that is religion. Here is the Mission San Diego. This is an example of how Christianity diffused from Europe to the New World throughout history. Or another example could be trade, whether we're trading innocuous items like spices on the Silk Road, or we're doing what we know now shouldn't be done at all, and we're trading people through the slave trade and triangular trade across the Atlantic Ocean. Migration as well has been a big cause of diffusion, just people moving from one place to the other. All right, as a result of diffusion, we have a couple ideas that you need to know. One of those is lingua franca. So right here, you see this sign of a subway stop in Japan, okay? Shibuya Station. It would be near this place. And you see that this sign, in addition to being in Japanese, is also in English, right? And that's because English serves as a lingua franca in a lot of different parts around our world. All right. Again, going back to the British Empire, going back to the extent of that empire, and also the extent to not the American Empire, so to speak, but just how powerful the United States has become in the last 200 years. Okay. So in lots of different places, not just Tokyo, but you see English used as a lingua franca. All right. Another great example of what we get as a result of diffusion is creolization. Okay. Haitian Creole is a language that's spoken primarily in Haiti, but in other parts of the world as well, where you're taking different languages and combining them together to get something new. In this case, indigenous African languages are combined with French to create Haitian Creole, which is kind of like a French-inspired language, but it's not really French. There's not really a lot of mutual intelligibility between Haitian Creole and French, meaning that a French speaker wouldn't necessarily understand a Haitian Creole speaker. Not like how when I speak Spanish, I can sort of sometimes understand someone who might be speaking Italian, although usually it doesn't work. All right, what causes diffusion today? Let's talk about contemporary causes of diffusion. We see things like urbanization, or essentially the growth of cities and the movement of people towards cities. We also see globalization, or the idea that our ideas can get around the globe in a very fast manner now because of things like technology, like the iPhone. Okay, migration, you'll see, is also still on this slide because it's not just a historical cause of diffusion, but it's a contemporary cause of diffusion as well. All right, now what does contemporary diffusion cause? We see cultural convergence. All right. This is the idea that our cultures are becoming more and more alike, more and more the same. Okay. And you see that with these examples of American fast food places in places that are not America, whether it's this Burger King across the street from La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, or these Taco Bells and McDonald's in different parts of Asia. Okay. Another example of what contemporary diffusion can cause is language extinction. All right. If more and more people are speaking English, whether it's their first language, second language, or just as a lingua franca, they have less of a reason to talk their own native language or their own indigenous language. So you're seeing some languages die out. In fact, the experts predict that about every 2 weeks we use one language off of the face of the earth. All right. You also see cultural divergence as well. Some people, especially those people who are indigenous, whether they're Native Americans or are indigenous to another part of the world, they're kind of afraid of this cultural convergence because they see it as a threat. They see that this Americanization is going to cause their own native culture to kind of die out. So they might take extra steps to preserve their own indigenous culture which could cause cultural divergence. All right, so what happens when cultures interact? So this is called Berry's acculturation model. This was developed by a social scientist named John Berry, and he studied what would happen to people when they moved from one place to another. And there was two dichotomies that he focused on. One of those being whether the person would reject or accept the new culture, the culture of the place that they're going to, and whether they would reject or accept their host culture or their origin culture, right? The culture that they're coming from. If you're rejecting the home culture and accepting the host culture, that's what we call assimilation. All right. If you're accepting both of them, that sounds pretty good to me. We would call that integration. If you're accepting the home culture but rejecting your host culture, we would call that separation. And if you're rejecting both of those, that would be marginalization. All right. So for assimilation, I have this image of Julian Castro, who was a presidential candidate and the former mayor of San Antonio, I believe. And he's a Mexican-American person, but didn't grow up speaking much Spanish. All right. And that's probably pretty common for a lot of people in this part of the world. All right. It's kind of true of me as well. I don't speak the best Spanish. And we called that assimilation. And we see that with a lot of Mexican Americans. And they're slowly starting to speak a little bit less and less Spanish as more and more generations are born here in the United States. Some Mexican American families might lose those ties back to their traditional Mexican culture. All right. Now, if you're accepting both the home culture and your host culture, we would call that integration. And that might be some sort of celebration of the culture of the place where you're coming from, but also still being able to integrate within the new culture. And the example I have here is it was an image of the San Diego night market. This picture is not at night, obviously, but it's a festival that, before COVID used to happen in the Convoy area of San Diego, where people could come and enjoy more traditional Asian food. But then, that place is right in the middle of the United States, and you're still accepting that home culture. Okay, if you are accepting the home culture, the culture from the place you came from, but rejecting the new culture, we would call that separation. All right, and I have this image of Chinatown in San Francisco, because if you are an immigrant from China and you move to Chinatown in the San Francisco Bay Area, but then you kind of limit yourself to that neighborhood and you never learn English, or you never eat more traditional American foods, or you never do anything to integrate yourself with American culture, that would be called separation. Okay. And the last one here is when you're rejecting both of them. And a good example of that is the forced conversion of the Aztecs. So this is like an image of that. Not, obviously it's a painting. But after Hernan Cortez and the conquistadors came and defeated the Aztec Empire, they forced those people to convert to Catholicism, to convert to Christianity. So they could no longer celebrate their traditional Aztec culture. And since they were forced to convert, they probably weren't too happy with their new culture either. And we call that marginalization. Not a very good situation there. All right. What happens when cultures interact? We can get things like multiculturalism. All right. You're seeing more and more places around the United States celebrate Dia de los Muertos right after Halloween. It's this celebration of our ancestors that comes from traditional Mexican culture, but it's also a combination of not only indigenous culture, but some elements of Catholicism as well. Okay. Canada is a great example of a multicultural place. Lots of immigrants from other places that integrate very seamlessly into Canadian culture. But then you could go too far where you might be like trying on different cultures in a disrespectful way. And that's what we call cultural appropriation. Like we see right here with this white person kind of degrading Native American culture in the name of just supporting the Cleveland Indians, the sports team. So my advice is to not do that. All right. That is it for Unit 3, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you would like. I try to get back to as many of those as I can. Good luck on whether it's your midterm or the national exam. Best of luck to you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.